Okay, so I thought on the close to the anniversary of 9/11, so this was an interesting topic, tragic topic, but also an interesting topic to research a little bit and give a presentation on. And my thanks goes to Rabbi Chaim Jachter, who he's written a number of books called Gray Matter, where he discusses issues that are, black and white, but gray. Right? Excellent. He's a Rebbe. He's a rabbi of a shul in Teaneck, New Jersey, and a Rebbe at one of the high schools there. And I've had the privilege of getting to see him over the summers. His daughters have attended Natalie's camp, and he is an authority on Eruv, so we've relied on him many times in terms of checking the camp Eruv and making sure that everything was properly contained. Okay, so just as a very brief introduction, Agunah is the tragic situation that we have when we don't know the status of her husband. We don't know, is he alive or not? And therefore, because of that terrible predicament, she's not allowed to get married because she might be a married woman. And a married woman who's with someone else, right? Well, it cannot be a marriage to someone else, even if there's, as I like to say, rabbi, chuppah, ring, witnesses, and smorgasbord, right? But it won't be a marriage because she is a married woman. And the results in terms of children from a second marriage, which is not a marriage because her husband is still alive, is that the children would be considered illegitimate children, mamzerim. So it's a very, very, very serious predicament. And certainly the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center on 9/11, that resulted in over 2,000 deaths, and there were 15 cases of agunot that were presented to different batei din, different Jewish courts in the New York metropolitan area. 10 of these cases were presented to the Beit Din of America, which is the Beit Din of the RCA, of the Rabbinical Council of America, and the OU, and the Orthodox Union. So Jachter went through the basic halachic approaches that brought about the permitting of these women to get married based on the halachic determination of the deaths of their husbands. Now, there is also an issue of women who went missing and their husbands being allowed to remarry. However, that is a lesser issue. The reason being that based on Torah law, not on rabbinic law, but based on Torah law, a man is allowed to have more than one wife. So even if his wife, on the outside chance that his wife is alive, right, were he to marry someone else, that would not affect anything. That would not affect the children. Okay, that's according to Torah law. We have what's called the Cherem of Rabbeinu Gershom, a very wise man, who ruled that a man is not allowed to marry more than one woman. But again, that is a rabbinic law. And therefore, in these extenuating circumstances, where all evidence is pointing towards the death of a wife, tragic death of a wife, but there is nothing to support that, but all the circumstantial evidence seems to clearly indicate that she is no longer alive, and we'll see how that will play also in terms of the husband's deaths and permitting the wives. So it's much easier to to allow that. And Rav Rees, who is the administrator of the Beit Din of America, said that the Dayanim followed the ruling of the Gesher HaChaim, that if there is adequate evidence that a wife was at the place where a tragedy occurred, and most people who were in that location and that situation perished, that is enough grounds to say that the husband can assume the wife has passed away, and therefore is allowed to go on and get married. However, when it comes to the husband's death and permitting the wives, there it is more difficult. We should know, Rabbi Jachter writes, just how much effort goes into resolving the cases of the Agunot. And rabbis of every generation, there is a sefer, a book called the Otsar HaPoskim. Otsar is like the storehouse of all the poskim, which is an encyclopedia on one part of Shulchan Aruch, on Even HaEzer, which deals with all of the marriage. And when he summarizes the responsa, the questions and answers that have been written to try to help Agunot, so that is 8 volumes, about 1,500 pages of a summary of all that has been written on this topic over the generations. And recently, though not as recent as 9/11, Rav Moshe Feinstein, of blessed memory, he ruled extensively about Agunot following the Holocaust. Rav Yitzchak Herzig, who was chief rabbi of Israel, wrote at length about Agunot during the War of Independence, and people who were lost in battle, lost in war, but there was no evidence, there was no testimony, there was no clear knowledge of their passing. Rav Avati Yosef has many cases of rulings about Agunot after the Yom Kippur War of 1973, and regrettably in 9/11, once again the poskim were called upon to try to help to find halachic basis to help and to release these women.
But the military already takes that into account, don't they?
Meaning what, though?
They already have a temporary divorce.
No, what Dov is referring to is in the time of the kingdom of King David, so soldiers would write according to Rashi, a conditional get, according to Rabbeinu Tam, would actually be a real get. But soldiers would write a get of some sort that would allow their wives to get remarried if they would not return. So if they died, there's no need for a get, and she can get remarried. And if he is alive but didn't return, which is the sticking point, which is the concern upon which all the Agunot issues ride, well, she has a get. But that is not in place today, Dov.
We don't do that?
No. So that does not help us. Now, the methodology, because we are dealing with such a strict prohibition, right? A married woman being with someone else is of the strictest of the prohibitions. So therefore, the practice involved is that only a rabbi of great, great stature would rule on it, and there should be 3 rabbis of eminent stature who should all agree before a lenient ruling is issued. Once that has been issued, it is not revisited. And that is very important. Meaning, we need to have a great rabbi and then other 3 very eminent rabbis. Right? So altogether 3 eminent rabbis ruling on it, and that way it gives the woman the confidence. But if it is subject to review, then the woman will never have that confidence, that peace of mind. neither she nor prospective spouses for her.
That's for lenient ruling.
That's when they rule leniently. Yes.
And
Yes.
the other ruling?
Well, they're not going to rule. They're going to, if they don't rule leniently, then we're left with a woman who might be married. Right? So, therefore, I believe it could be revisited if other issues come up which might serve as indications. And we'll see as we move along the different possible indications. But once that ruling has been issued, it is not reviewed, it is not up for reversal, and the woman needs to know that 100%
Go ahead.
she can and shall go ahead and get married. What is the process that the dayanim, that the judges would go through in these cases? And the practice is to first research the matter thoroughly. And if they arrive at a lenient decision based on common sense alone, then, right, meaning common sense in the World Trade Center, right, there are outside chances of what might have happened, right? Perhaps the person, did escape and went mad and is now living out in the forest of the Adirondack, I don't know, right? But if it's common sense, then they would subsequently explore whether there is a halachic basis and go to great lengths to find a halachic basis for a lenient ruling. In the World Trade Center, again, Rav Yonah Rees, who is the administrator of the Beit Din of America, he devoted months of meticulous research, working with public organizations, private agencies, to create the material that the dayanim, that the judges could then draw their conclusions. Right? This included telephone logs, cell phones, subway, elevator records. Right? Anyone checking into the World Trade Center, right, for work needed to scan their ID card by the elevators. There were elevator records, knowing who went in at what time to which floor. And we know that which floor was crucial in terms of the possibility of staying alive or not, as well as DNA testing and dental records. The Gemara, wherever there's a leniency, it's based on the understanding that exhaustive research has been done. Now, we've had, and all of the Gemara sources are from the Gemara Yevamot, which we are learning in the morning, but it's the next 20 daf that we have not yet gotten to. But parts which we have gotten to deals with a situation that a woman's husband traveled le'ever hayam, overseas. Now, in the time of the Talmud, believe it or not, they didn't have Skype or FaceTime. You know, that's the Chiddush, right? I mean, FaceTime, but they didn't even have Skype, which is so old compared to FaceTime. Person would travel overseas, you might not hear from them for months. Right? Maybe they could send a letter back, maybe they couldn't. And one witness comes and says her husband died. Normally, for any testimony, we require there to be two witnesses. But here, it could be one witness and a witness that's not normally accepted even as one of two witnesses. Such a person could be accepted as the one witness. The woman herself can come back and give testimony. Normally, one is not believed to give testimony about that affects themselves in such a serious manner. However, at the same time, in order that we or no one, she, we, anyone should not be just quick to go ahead, if the person does return afterwards, then there are serious repercussions for any subsequent relationship that she might have gone into. So we have a leniency, but at the same time, there is a certain degree of strictness to make sure that it's not going to just be carte blanche, and it should not, things should not be taken in a non-serious, in a flippant manner.
What if his twin returns and she won't know?
I think people usually can tell the difference between their husband, between their spouse, and a twin. Right? So, yeah. Okay? Therefore, right, they were very, very careful, and when there was testimony, they emphasized the seriousness of this testimony. There's always a concern that someone thinks to himself, of course he died. So I'll go to the Beit Din and I'll give testimony saying I had a phone conversation, I know, I heard, this, right? And offer false information in order to reach the end that he knows is for sure the case. And of course we can't allow for that. That breaks down the whole system. Okay. So they have to be very, very careful with all of the testimony and to very, very scrupulously investigate all the matters. Now, many would say that even after a lenient ruling, the ruling would be to wait a full year before issuing that lenient ruling. Right? And Rav Gedalia Schwartz of Chicago, who's one of the main poskim, true, heavyweight, eminent, worldwide respected poskim of the RCA, of the Beit Din of America, right? That he reports when he consulted with Rav Avadi Yosef regarding one of these agunot, he agreed with the ruling, but he advised that they should wait wait until September 11th, 2002, or probably the Hebrew date, whatever exactly that was. Okay, and once again, once a recognized, duly competent Beit Din has issued a lenient ruling, another Beit Din or Rav should not revisit the case and review the cogency, the accuracy of their ruling, as we said before. Otherwise, her plight is never truly resolved, right? Until she gets the approval of every halachic authority in the world. Good luck to her, right? So therefore, the ruling is that once there is a ruling, everyone else back off. Obviously, it needs to be the ruling of duly recognized and competent Beit Din. Yes, Aya.
This matter of proving that a woman is ready to marry is such a critical issue. Years ago, when I was working in Israel, a friend of mine who was divorced in America came to live in Israel, and we got together, and she met an Israeli, and they wanted to get married. But the rabbinic council knew that she had been married and were not sure about her divorce. I had to come and give testimony before 3 rabbanim that this indeed was this woman, that I know for a fact, I knew her for years, I know for a fact that she was divorced, and that yes, it was she got a get as well as a civil divorce.
Yeah.
They would not simply take her word for it.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. I know the RCC Beit Din, when a get is given, so both the man and the woman receive a document stating that yes, a proper get was administered, and this in the state, and this in this Beit Din, and the judges sign on, but the actual get is not given to. It's given to her as part of the process of the divorce, but she doesn't hold on to. She doesn't retain that get, lest she loses it, and right.
Right.
That stays by them on file. Yes.
And they slash it with the knife so that it can't be used again.
Interesting.
By anybody else.
I wasn't aware of
You do
that.
what I did. When I got divorced, I went to Beit Din of Ida for a deed to make sure I don't have any problem.
problem.
Because sometimes RCC are not accepted, because we Jews don't accept each other.
No. Okay. Now, there are three I'm sorry, Warren?
No.
Oh, glasses. There are three basic categories of situations that present themselves, and certainly in this case presented themselves. Number one was there were remains of the missing husband. And the question then is the proper identification of those remains as being unequivocally the husband. So that is category one. Category two is when nothing was found. A body was not found, but there is sufficient evidence that the husband was at the World Trade Center at the time of the attack, in part of the building where all or the vast majority of the people were unable to escape. And soon we'll go over the basic facts of what happened, and we'll be able to build on that. Lastly, the third category, which is the most difficult category, is when no remains are found, and there is no obvious evidence that the husband was in that section of the trade center where all or most people were unable to escape. However, if he followed his usual routine, then that's where he would have been. Right? So you have a situation, we'll soon see, well, this week or next week, where people either were on the phone right up to the point of the collapse of the building, right? Or you have people who called home and checked in, "Hi honey, I'm here at work. I just wanted to wish you a good day." And they were at a point of the building where no one survived from the point of impact. But you also have cases where the person went to work. And he's there every day at this and this time. But that's all we have.
Who can prove any of that?
Who can prove it? And that's where it becomes very difficult. And we'll see sources in the Talmud of how of the general ruling, and then we'll see how the poskim over the generations have seen some. I wouldn't call it loopholes, but have seen areas which allow for leniency. So those are the three categories. Number one, identifying remains. Number two, sufficient evidence. Number three, usual routine, but no remains and no sufficient evidence. Okay, so let's go over, first of all, the basic facts. The first plane hit the north tower of the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m., crashing in between floors 93 and 98. Right? The depraved, evil individuals who did this, right, made sure to get themselves big planes that were set to go on a long flight filled with fuel in order to try to kill as many people in their depraved way of looking at the world, to try to kill as many people as possible. So, it hit the North Tower, 8:46 a.m., floors 93 to 98. The Beit Din, through extensive consultation with experts, determined this immediately destroyed the elevators and all stairways from the 92nd floor and above. So anyone above the 92nd floor, there was no way, right? People jumped out of the windows, tragically, we saw, right? But there was no way to evacuate alive from that building if you are on the 92nd floor and above from 846 and on. Okay? Anyone who could be placed in that building at 846, 92nd floor and up, there was no way out. And there are no known survivors from that area. The building collapsed at 10:29 a.m. The second plane hit the southern tower at 9:02 a.m. Right? 16 minutes later, the second plane hit the southern tower between floors 84 and 87, and that building collapsed at 9:59 a.m. 57 minutes later, that collapsed. The first one lasted about an hour and 45 minutes. The second one less than an hour. Only 10 survivors are known of those who are at floor 78 and above at the time of impact. These 10 survivors survived because they were standing in stairwell A of the southern tower. Elevators in stairwell B were destroyed by the impact. And it seems stairwell A remained intact for a very brief time after the impact. So people who were standing immediately next to this stairway were able to survive. The 10 survivors who were by stairway A sustained serious injuries and only survived because of the intervention, because of God, and the intervention of immediate hospitalization. Okay, those are the issue. That is what happened. So today, let's deal with category 1, which was identifying remains. Okay, and what is considered proper evidence and is what and what is not. The simple case, which we didn't have on 9/11.
DNA.
Well, we'll discuss DNA. The simple case is the first source, which we have the Mishnah both in Hebrew and in English, and the Shulchan Aruch in Hebrew on the first side and in English on the second side. The Mishnah says, Ein me'idin al partsuf panim im hachotem, ella al partsuf panim im hachotem. One can only give testimony. Yes, I saw the husband. What must that testimony be? Just one second. Hello, Zachary. Are you coming in for the shear? Okay. No. It's on allowing Agunah to remarry after 9/11. Okay.
That'll be great.
You're in, Zach.
Good luck.
Okay.
How did you do it? Good luck here. Okay, put me up. Thanks.
You're in. Okay. So the first source that we have, once we've already gone through all of the details of what we can and can't do and what happened, the first source is the Mishnah in Yevamot, Daf Kufchaf Amud Aleph 128. Ein me'idin el al partsuf panim im hachotem. One can only give testimony on the face with the nose. Af al pi sheyesh simanim begufo ubekelav. Even though there are other simanim, identifying marks on his body or on his clothing. Ein me'idin. Okay. Nevertheless, that is not enough. It must be the face with the nose. Ein me'idin el agitate say nafsho. They can only give testimony if they saw the actual death. Afilu ra'u muguya b'tzalu v'chaya chayo chelet bo. Right? Even though they might have seen him, right, with his arteries cut, crucified, or being eaten by a wild animal. Ein me'idin el ad gimel yamim. And it's got to be within 3 days of death. Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba Omer lo kol ha'adam, v'lo kol ha'makam, v'lo kol ha'sha'ot shavin. Not every person, not every place, not every time, season in other words, is the same. So he says there's not these hard cut rulings. It also depends on the situation.
Why the nose?
Without that, the Shulchan Aruch rules that it's hard to really know, right? I guess the nose sort of brings everything together. That's what it seems.
The nose knows.
The nose knows. Okay. Shulchan Aruch, Even HaEzer. Again, Even HaEzer is the part, the one of the four parts of Shulchan Aruch that deals with all of the marriage laws and deals extensively with these issues of when a woman is allowed to get married. Matza'u harog, O mate, if we find him and he has been killed or dead, im padachto v'chatmo u'pratzuf panav kayamim, if the forehead, the nose, and the face is intact, v'hikiru b'hem, and he recognized through that, shehu ploni, that this is this person, me'idin alav, they can give testimony. V'im nital echad me'elu, if one of these is taken, is not there, that's mean key words. Even though there is a siman, a sign, muvhak, clear, biyoter, very clear. Bikelav, on his garments, einam klum, worthless. Dechayshin on the she'ela, maybe he borrowed someone else's jacket. Va'afil hayalem siman begufo, even if there were signs on the body. Va'afilu shuma. How are we defining shuma? A mole. Ein me'idin alav. Aval hayulem begufo simanim muvhakim biyoter. But if there were simanim muvhakim biyoter, very clear signs on the garments, not. Who knows that was him wearing those garments? But simanim muvhakim biyoter, signs very clear on the body, me'idin alav, then they will give testimony. The Ramah says, Kigon, shelo yater o chaser, he had an added finger, or was missing a finger. Oshinoy, or another serious deviation in one of his limbs. Aval katan or arach or chiver v'sumak, but if he's very tall, very short, right? Lo havi siman muvak. That's not considered a siman muvak. Not right. Even 100 indications that are not clear indications, eino klum. No. Even to join it together. If he had a large, how we define a gavshushin on his nose? Yeah, a large lump or growth. Yeah, on his nose. Or his nose is really, I wouldn't say bent, but I would say almost disfigured. That's a siman muvak. Ma'ata kuma, a little bit crooked, join the club. Low, that doesn't work. Right? So to a sign on his body or on one of his limbs. Right? Large teeth, not. Okay. So that is the Mishnah, and that is the Shulchan Aruch on the Mishnah. So if there is a siman muvhak biyoter, an exceedingly clear sign, we can rely on that. The later authorities helped to give us a definition of that. And they said if fewer than 1 in 1,000 people share this feature, it is a siman muvhak biyoter. So tall is not, right? 7'2", right? I don't think there's more than 1 in 1,000 people who are that tall, right?
Everybody in the basketball league.
Yes. Okay. A middle category is features that are neither very common nor very rare. such a siman is not automatically discounted, nor is it accepted. The accepted approach is that two such simanim may be combined to constitute a siman muvhak biyoter. Okay, furthermore, a siman beinoni, right, this middle, right, can be combined with other relatively convincing evidence. Right? In other words, Rav Yitzchak Elchanan Spector ruled that two lesser simanim could count as a beinoni. Okay? Now, so that can count as one of the two middle level indicators. Okay, in Otzar HaPoskin, I mentioned before, he goes through 165 different bodily features and categorizes them as what type of siman would that be considered. Okay, nowadays, and in the case of the World Trade Center, the two of the most relevant issues were the admissibility of dental records and of DNA evidence. The Beit Shmuel, going back hundreds and hundreds of years, rules that a hole that goes through an entire tooth constitutes a siman muvhak. The Aruch HaShulchan, writing in the late 19th century, says that holes in teeth do not constitute a siman muvhak, right? They had a cavity, okay? That's not going to be worth all that much. But Rav Moshe Feinstein, of blessed memory, in 1959, Rav Avadia Yosef, of blessed memory, writing in 1974, ruled that dental records are acceptable as a component to an identification of a missing husband. And he says that these dental records are much more specific than that which the Aruch HaShulchan had mentioned. Right? That he said it's not a hole in the teeth. Granted, a hole in the tooth is not. Dental records are quite specific. Among Batei Din in Israel, they accepted dental records as a siman muvhak biyoter, right? As that exceptionally clear sign that alone sufficed for testimony. The Beit Din of America partially relied on dental records for identifying some of the missing husbands. The more recent issue that has come up is, of course, DNA testing. In Israel, Rav Vosner, Rav Karelitz ruled that it is admissible as partial evidence. We'll soon see what the issue is. Because if we're setting the bar at 1 in 1,000, right, the accuracy of DNA testing is well beyond, far better than giving us a 1 in 1,000 hit. There are those that ruled it's good as partial evidence, right? They viewed it as a siman beinoni, right? Rav Rees again reported that Rav Elyashiv ruled that one may partially rely upon DNA. Now, they preferred to use the DNA sample from a person's personal effects, right? Hair from a hairbrush. Haven't had one of those in a while. But hair from a hairbrush, right? Or saliva from a toothbrush, right? That's directly to the person, as opposed to using the DNA of immediate family in order to make an identification. Rav Zalman Nechemya Goldberg concluded that DNA, he held, constituted a siman muvhak biyoter, this extra clear siman that was standalone. And he noted, as I mentioned a moment ago, that the DNA, the margin of error, right, ranges from 1 billion to 1 or a quintillion to 1, according to the people who tested DNA. But it's certainly well beyond, well beyond 1,000 to 1. Right? Now, he draws an analogy to an earlier ruling of Rav Yitzchak Elchanan that a photograph of a missing husband showing that he is dead is sufficient evidence. So if a photograph is considered sufficient evidence, right, and Rav Ovadia Yosef also did, right, so he felt that DNA is sufficient standalone evidence. And we'll mention later again, but those who have issues with accepting the dental records or DNA as the Siman Muvak Biyoter, it's not because they say that it's not that clear, but their concern is more about the legitimacy and the accuracy of those testing, right? In other words, it's accurate, right? The DNA of that person, the DNA sample is very accurate. Did the samples get mixed up? Did they, right? That's the issue where there are many other doubts that can come in.
Right.
Okay, so that is the issue. I remember in the OJ case, so there was a lot of talk about sloppiness of the police in their handling of different specimens, different. Yeah.
They can retest it, so that's not.
Okay, but that's where it seems that's where the issue came in mostly. Okay, so the ruling was basically that with the dental records and or the DNA. But let's see. Well, we said the Beit Din used that as partial, not as full. Now, so again, they use that for partially of the DNA for identification. A major question arises whether one may rely upon the civil authorities and their reports. The Shulchan Aruch rules on the Gemara in Gittin that you can't rely on the report of a non-Jewish court saying they executed a Jew, because they're going to they might falsely report that in order to glorify their effectiveness and instill fear upon the residents of the land. How does that apply to us today when the concerns voiced by those opinions are not relevant to us today? Right? The governments don't try to show just how trigger happy they are. And this has been debated over the centuries. Right? Rav Yitzchak Elchanan adopted the lenient view, as did the Aruch HaShulchan writes that the lenient view has become the accepted, that we can. Now, another factor to keep in mind is that even everyone will have credibility in areas of halacha where they testify in their professional capacity. Right? In Shulchan Aruch, we're discussing kosher foods and forbidden mixtures, and some milk fell into the chicken soup. So we discussed tasting it to see is there the taste of milk or not. Who's going to taste it? There's a taste of milk, and that's basically the 1/60th. There's a taste of milk that you're not allowed to have it, so who can taste it? The Gemara says you have a chef, a non-Jewish chef, taste it. Are we going to rely on the testimony of the non-Jewish chef? Maybe he's going to get his kicks out of watching all these Jews eating their chicken milk soup, right? Well, if he is a professional chef whose reputation is at stake and his professional integrity is at stake, yes, then he can be trusted. So too, someone who is testifying in their professional capacity is believed, right? Especially, as we mentioned before, in the case of Agunot, where we are lenient in the testimony of who is acceptable to give their testimony. Rav Moshe Feinstein admitted the testimony of the U.S. War Department about a plane of a missing husband that plunged into the English Channel during World War II. And he relied on the testimony of the Belgian government that the Nazis transported a missing husband to Auschwitz. Rav Ovadia Yosef trusted even the Russian government, that a missing husband died in a battle with the Nazis during World War II. So based on that, the Beit Din of America relied partially on the New York City medical examiner's testimony regarding DNA tests and administered under their auspices. Right? The medical examiner told Rav Yonah Rees that dental records are examined 5 times, no less than 5 times, to make sure of their accuracy. Another factor, Rosal Nechemi ruled that we can rely upon American Airlines, that the missing husband was on board one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. They have a professional reputation to uphold, that they know who's on their planes and who's not on their planes. And there's no reason for them to lie, and that would certainly open up a tremendous liability for lawsuits were they to do so. And therefore, they also can be trusted according to halacha. Lastly, for today, personal items found near the scene of the death. Right? Personal items found near the body. Right? So the Shulchan Aruch, we said before, said that even if it is muvhak biyoter, it is very, very clear, it can't be used as testimony. The reason being, we saw, what did the Ramah say? It could be that someone lent these items. Right? And he makes no exceptions to this whatsoever. Others say that if it's a highly unique item and personal item that one does not normally lend out, right? One's wallet, one's wedding ring, right, are not things that one normally lends to others. If I am going to lend someone my wallet, you can be sure I'm going to take out my license, my credit cards, and all other items in there. Right? And the Beit Shmuel rules that items that people do not normally lend is acceptable. And Rav Moshe and Rav Avad Yosef again ruled in the past leniently and partially upon discovery of such items to identify the missing husband. So, therefore, the Beit of America partially relied upon the discovery of the pants. There was a case of the pants of a missing husband containing his wallet, driver's license, and credit cards. Right? Now, even though one might lend clothing to one another, I don't lend him my pants if my wallet is inside with all of my important documents in there. Furthermore, right, this was not that they were going out to do a chesed program and to help someone and clean a yard. They were going as businessmen to the World Trade Center. And business attire, even if I will sometimes, perhaps, right, I might consider borrowing someone's sweatpants or work pants, right, in order to go do some work in their backyard, right? I don't dress the way they dress at the World Trade Center, and I don't borrow someone else's pants to come to work, right? So therefore, all of these were very, very likely, right? In our affluent society, certainly, people are not borrowing other people's pants to go to work. So that really covered category A. Category A was when either the remains were found or other things were found that clearly, right, they were able to link with DNA or dental records or items. Those were, according to some, each of those is a siman muvak biyoter, standalone indication. According to others, right, it can be combined with other factors, and certainly we had the other factors. Well, in all the cases the Beit Din ruled, there were enough factors to combine and reach their conclusion. Categories 2 and 3 we'll leave for next week. That's when there was nothing, no part of the body was found. no items were found, but there is sufficient evidence that the person was there in a place that was unsurvivable. And lastly, the most difficult, which is the third category, where all we have is the usual routine of the person that puts them at this unsurvivable spot. But we have nothing else corroborating that in fact they were there at that time. So we'll pick up here, please God, Bez Hashem, next week. And if you want to hold the paper, you can. You want me to hold it for you, I can do that also, because we'll be continuing with this and then another source sheet I'm going to add on next week.